Some shit has come to light. So, you want to start?
Well, the only thing I'd like to say, I can start, and we got here and I asked Sned, do you have any advice? And he said, well, just expect hecklers. We actually had a little bit of advance notice, so I cut out from the bar about 30 minutes early and put together a PowerPoint presentation. This is the third time we've done it. Jeff came out to Denver over the summer. We gave a talk to a group, an airline or aviation group, so we'll give it a shot again. And if you guys remember something different about 5 years ago that we did, it's your memory slide.
Think about you shooting that
With your 38 5-round pistol.
We'll do the PowerPoint and then we'll have questions at the end. We kind of left it, I took out a lot of stuff for, a lot of these talks I do is for non-aviation people, non-military. So I took some out, but I left some in because there's a lot of wives that weren't around for this thing 25 years ago, so just bear with us.
What?
Yeah. There's a 86 intruder, familiar?
Yeah. No idea.
Remember, this is actually the plane that we were flying that night that we got shot down.
This is 161668.
The best airport we have.
Somebody got the name on it.
That was an election when that was
No, mine was on just for the non-aviation fight.
Nice helmet.
On the right.
Doing our secondary mission. That's what it looks like in the cockpit. Looking good. Okay, 3-wire.
Wire. No wire, goddamn wire. Hell, it's on south.
Wires behind you. We were in the Red Sea. Kind of see it's a little bit of a flight from the Red Sea. That's all right.
Well, why not the Red Sea? Seriously. Yeah. That seems sensitive.
Part of the Red Sea.
Blue country. Just remember that the blue country Iraq. That's where the targets were.
Any questions on that?
Did you see Moses while you were there?
For those of you that don't remember, it's H3. And if you look on the top left slide, there's H1, H2, and H3. And the Kennedy was launching for the H2 that night. The gunner gave them a high altitude attack on H2, and they couldn't get gas, so they aborted the entire mission.
You guys that were there that night, they couldn't get gas because they didn't do what we did. Drove the frickin' tankers down to the point that they were so scared. We said, we're going to clear you the train, don't worry about it, but we're going to get the frickin' gas.
We did.
Yeah, we did.
So you guys remember we were lined up over Capitol 1, facing the stick back, and it was still day when we manned up. And I think it was still day when we were tanking. And remember that cluster that they had us practice a gazillion times, where you have a tanker at various altitudes. How many planes was on each tanker? You guys remember?
6 planes in each tanker, 24 planes.
Oh,
6
man,
tankers.
what a mess. So we practiced it a bunch of times. When we went out and did it, it turned out that it didn't work real well because it was turbulent. So we were bouncing all over the place.
Well, that's because there was weather, remember? There was all that. We lowered into the clouds and it's through there.
So, well, we told you, we failed to how many times? we were carrying rocks, and we couldn't keep up with it real well when it was going up. We finally got the gas, and we're going into Iraq, and to get the gas, it wasn't transferring into the fuel tanks. And like I said, new shit has come to light. We were talking to AJ, and apparently it's been his fault, because the night before, he was on a flight where Scott Spiker got shot down, and they had an SA-2 come up, and they moved into it, lost some energy, so they did a big negative G thing to get back energy so they could move into the next SA-2, and then you went out low, right, you said? Right. So when they got back, the fuel was leaking all over the, you tell them, it was leaking all over the fuselage. Yeah, it broke so they tried, I guess they said they fixed it the night before, but when we were going into Iraq, we couldn't get the fuel to transfer down into the store, to the centerline tank. And so we went to the manual fueling handle, and it went in, but then I couldn't get the manual fueling handle down. So when we actually went into Iraq, I was unstrapped and sitting on the seat trying to put the fucking handle down.
Oh, shit. Did you save your seat when you were
We know that I got strapped back in.
You might be using that later.
Yeah, I'm making a calculation in my head, thinking, well, if you don't get it back down, the way it works is, and I don't remember this all that clearly, the way it works is you can't get it into the center line unless either the switch works or you use the manual fueling handle. That gets it in. But if you leave the manual fueling handle up,
it won't come back.
It won't come back out of the wings, right? Yeah. So it won't come back. And I remember doing the calculation in my head, saying, well, if it's not down all the way, we'll make it back to Saudi Arabia. And that's what we went on.
It's a great.
Wow!
When we got shot down, I had.
Hey, you said the worst part.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
We're not quite there yet. This is some of the defenses they had operating in the area.
Show it.
AAA, which is the machine gun bomb. This is the big one.
Roll.
No, that's the wrong ass.
This is a big
Occupy
That's too big.
the country of France.
The other thing, the thing was the rolling would get you low, but we were coming in low enough that the idea was the crack crossing line would be too fast for them to like find us pointed and shoot us.
How'd that work out?
All right, well,
Yeah.
Not that great.
Thanks.
well, the other part was that they said these SA-6s go up to 30,000 feet. So 2 days later, you figured out, okay, if you go in above, what was it, 17 or something, they'd fall off and wouldn't get it. But we didn't know that going in, so we couldn't plan to go in at 25. That's why we decided to go in low. And I took heat for that at a briefing after the, not personal heat, but at their briefing after the war to strike you, they had our strike, and they said the mistake was not going high. I'm like, dude, you told me the missiles would go up to 30,000 feet. What do you do? And if one site isn't working, then that site, or that if one site isn't down from harm, that dude's going to get you. The other thing I would point out is the gouge on AAA, because it looks really scary, but not many planes get hit by it. That kind of got That's not what hit you. That's not what hit us. That's what looked the scariest.
What about that, Jethro? He's like,
Jeff had his eyes closed from the IP. He had the target, he said, Jeff.
Over that one.
All I'll tell you is, Ron looked out and he went, I'm back in the hood.
Gunner said the same thing.
That's really pretty big.
I
just want to say that.
Crazy.
Don't look out. I got it. Don't look out.
That worked.
Yeah, also, yeah.
That's right, yeah.
They were out there.
Oh, yeah. How much ordinance did they
Yeah.
spend in the war? Go back to that last slide. Let's get those Tomcats back in.
Well, not everybody knows the story of the Tomcat, so. Same issue with Sparrow. You guys know the story. Well, we went in, and one of the Tomcats saw a bogey out there, and they got permission from the AWACS to launch the Sparrow at the bogey. And then somebody came over the radio and said, it's a friendly, aborted missile. They turned the missile off. Next thing you know, Bob and Jeff don't come back. So, Gunner lands.
I can tell that story real quick.
Yeah.
Real quick, I think most of you know it, but so I land, and of course Dave and I are so distracted because we pull off target, check in, 3-4, check in, 3-4. Oh God! I mean, and Dave and I we're basket cases anyway because I never saw anything like that in my life, and we expected a lot of crap and nothing like that. So we get back to the carrier, and the tank says, Mixon wants to talk to you on the frickin' Kennedy because of the F-14 shoot. They shot this frickin' Sparrow. So I go, fine, we get in a helo, and now it's like, 4:30, 5 in the morning. Dave, see it, do the debrief. Get in the helo, go over and see Riley. Fortunately, Riley knew me from the rag, which is really, really cool. Because Kag was like, he wasn't real happy with what happened that night. We had 2 86s shot to shit. 2 guys down for sure. And when I walk in, Riley goes, hey, Gunner, how's it going? I go, thank God. So he said, what happened out there? I said, well, it was basically a shit sandwich, man. I mean, we went in there, we had all these rollings, we did all this crap right, everybody approved this thing, and they shot the shit out of us, okay? But what it really turned out was we got hit by a missile, right? Not your blade, right? And Dave, through his magic, Wolf, through all this crap, Sneevely said, screw you guys, and took a direct hit. Kuyat, style, they shut their eyes like there's a bad guy out there. They came out smelling like roses. So. But it was really a tough night as far as even being a strength lead and everything else. So, and Riley was really cool, the Admiral, and he was senior to Guy, and I don't think they liked each other, did they?
No.
But fortunately, Guy liked me and Riley liked me, so, and Kay hated us. So it was a good deal. So I said, not DK, but okay, he hated these sixes. So anyway, so I go on, sir, my concern is that they shot the Sparrow and it shot one of your guys down. I said, there ain't no way. We kept pulling up just so that we are getting our ordnance off and we were down the frickin' deck so frickin' low, you'd never see us in a million years. So that was the long and short of that whole thing, but not a fun night for me at all. Amen.
Well,
you guys are eating pancakes and frickin' where'd you guys land?
oh yeah, there was a
Just get the big pancakes. Dave and I went up to the tanker room straight. And Dave and I went to the tanker room straight. And
You're sure Bob and Bill got shut down, but I understand the duty, my guy.
You took the duty from me. I had it.
It was supposed to be played on 3 axes. One was supposed to go up, one was supposed to go left, and then 2 from the right. And as we got this, the double secret guys came down and said, that they found this emitter that looked like smoke. And we went back. My theory was, there's no way it's got a PAR, a CWAR. It's got 15 parts. There's no way they know how to work. But it was his route up the middle. So it was like, okay, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Good luck. Good luck.
So we moved to that. And when we did go inbound, I don't know about you guys, but that was when it was actually pretty quiet. I remember we were down low. I remember seeing a searchlight over for us. And then as soon as we turned, everything came up.
Yeah, so by the time I got there,
We told them you were coming.
and the only thing that of your story, I think I've told you this before, is that you're playing hit right on your target, right on your time. I thought, oh my God, those guys are killing it. Those guys, because you had the PLL, right? You had the PLL. It blew up like shit. I was like, oh, great hits, Bob. That was your play.
I had 997 hours when we got shot down.
Yeah.
If we'd have made it back to the boat, that would have been my 1,000 hours.
Never get that
Bob has lost control of the bridge. All
Alright, here's our target.
We're gonna get somewhere.
There's our bombs, the rockeye bombs.
Yeah.
Here's the tactics. The IPs, the initial points, so you can see 1 and 2 off to the left, 3 and 4 to the right. And I think it was about 15 miles out from the IP. So like Jeff said, we were at 200 feet the whole way at 420 knots, I think. And then just as we got to the IP, I think we were at 480 right there at the IP, and everybody kind of accelerated from there. And up to the IP, it was kind of looking around. I was kind of, to be honest, a little disappointed because it looked like the target was clear. There was going to be nothing for us to go in there, and it was going to be pretty simple. And as soon as we got to that turn, everything, like Jeff said, it just exploded.
I think that had to be 400 feet because that was what it needed for the rockeye. The rockeye didn't work.
Yeah, we had that
You
elevator.
went in low, but you had to elevate it forward.
Yeah, no, we did the same
We
thing.
raised, we climbed, we climbed up 300 feet on the rock. It's all coming together. It's all coming together. We made the turn there, and the Iraqis shot parachute flares all around.
That was a big thing.
And also the AAA started there. So for us, we never knew what the parachute flares were. We had no idea. For us, we honestly thought, for me, I thought it was the AAA just lighting up the sky. It was so bright, and they could see us. And we were just doing an easy jink all the way to the target, and I had one missile go in front of me. I did a nice little break on it. And Jeff said, no idea. It was pretty far.
It was an
It might have been right
enemy.
behind you.
Enemy.
But
There was no such thing.
It's not a friendly rocket. No such thing as a friendly missile.
So a small rocket mortar.
it was parallel to the ground.
It was white.
And so we got to about 8 miles out, and Jeff said, how far are we?
How close are you?
Yeah, and I gave him a time. He was upset about that. I gave him 1 hour. He wanted distance. And so I came inside the cockpit for just a second to check something and check the timing. And so I'm like, if I look this way or that way, we're dead. And we wouldn't be here tonight. Because I look this way, and there it is. I see a missile. So I'm coming this way. I see a missile pulling lead on me, and I start a hard brake turn into him. And I'm like, this is going to work. I got it coming. And all of a sudden, there's a huge explosion.
Yeah, it's proximity.
No. New shit has come to light.
All right, so I'm calling on this one I see.
Right. 5 years later.
I'm calling on it, and unbeknownst to me, the Iraqis shot a salvo of Rollins, 2 of them. The one I never saw was.
I never saw the second.
Well, we didn't.
I
either.
saw it.
And there was a huge explosion from that little missile, and the whole plane just shook violently, and it was just like a band. Like when you're a kid sticking a pencil in, there goes number 1 engine. Right up to a hole.
That's a good book,
Yeah.
So, as you said, new shit has come to light about 5 years ago, or 3 or 4 years ago. I sit and work in New York City, and my mom calls me. She says, "Hey, Jeff, there's a guy who says he's an Iraqi general, and he says he knows you and he wants to meet you." And there was actually another general a few years back who had sort of the same deal. And so I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll contact him. What's the number?" So I call the guy up, and it turns out that the Iraqi general is a guy named Latham Munir, and he was the commanding officer of H3 when we got shot down. So he saw it from the other perspective. So when we say new shit has come to light, we've had dinner with him a few times, and he is now a pretty decent friend of ours. And we're going to make a pitch later on because we're going to do a presentation. We'd like to have him as part of it. But we had always argued for years that he thought it was an SA-6, the guys, and I said no, it was the Roland, because I know more, we got love. So this came up, we had a conversation with the general, and he said, yes, Jeff, it was the Roland. And I said, ha! And the general said,
Could you say that again? Okay, good, I got it.
and the general looked at me and said, yes, but if you'd have hit your flares 5 seconds earlier, you wouldn't have gotten shot down.
Did you have any friends
Ha!
laugh?
No, that was part of the, it was a program, and that was part of why I was ticked at him when he, or not him, at the 7.5 mile marker, because I was supposed to hit the program at 5 miles. So it was one of those deals, for fans will remember this, I was working the offset. The FLIR was down, so I had to work with the radar. And the PLO tanks were close enough to each other that I wasn't going to be able to break out the PLO tanks until I was about 3 or 4 miles away. So I really wanted to focus on that part. And at 7.5 miles, it meant that I had to keep that, click the program thing in my head for another 20 seconds or and that is exactly when the missile came up. So the general was right. If we hit the chaff and flares a little bit earlier, it wouldn't have got us. Well, on the other hand,
Yeah, I don't think, Jeff, we'll talk about this later. I don't think so. I used to do the Roland threat stuff, and that would not have distracted that. I'll talk to you.
all right. So,
New information is coming late.
Well, definitely, we got hit with that other missile, the missile, and the other engine, we lost the other engine right away, and so there was.
Hey, Jeff, go through this, or Bobby, go through this really carefully, because this is really important stuff. This is really neat.
Okay,
I
yeah,
mean, basically,
yeah. I mean, we got hit with that. Well, we know the first engine went winding down right away, and so shortly, like seconds later, the other one went, and so. Jeff remembers calling for the ejection. I remember calling for the ejection. We both remember grabbing the handles and then waking up on the ground.
Jeff had to strap himself back in.
The point is, he insists that he said eject, and he pulled. And I insist that I was the one that said eject.
Well, you were both.
Good old
A6.
Because later on, I don't remember exactly what was said.
But we both came to the same conclusion at the same exact time because we landed on the ground. And we were only at 300 feet because that's where I raced it up just to get the bombs to arm. And that was our mission on 159P was get those bombs on target. And so when the second engine went, I just pulled the lower handle. I didn't get the correct body position because I really didn't want to let go of that stick. I was so low to the ground, going so fast. And as soon as I pulled the handle, we blacked out. but I ended up breaking this arm here when the seat went up. Had a compression fracture in my back, and then we go through the canopy, and as soon as that wind caught the canopy.
What do you remember of that?
I just put it all two and two together, because when we got into the wind stream, the canopy, the parachute,
Do you remember
broke my.
that?
But I don't know what happened. I broke my collarbone.
Dude, you collarbone on the right side.
Yeah.
Were you leaning maybe towards the center?
We were just going so fast.
I'm curious, did you hit the canopy
Because
all the
Luke,
way up?
he still flies. So,
Are you talking about
Yeah, your shoulder.
That's
You
coming.
beat up pretty hard
That's coming.
here. That's what I always thought. Is
Yeah.
you pulled
Well,
it
no,
down
it
with
wasn't.
one hand and probably your right hand.
Well, what happened was, we got into the wind stream, and the opening shock broke this collarbone. And we were passed out. So can you imagine hitting the ground passed out? Well, of course, So when I hit, right on my face, I hit this elbow here on the ground, and that's what broke this arm.
Oh, that was
Yeah. And so Jeff was kind of the same situation as far as we were flat on our face.
Except
hand on the ground.
we saw your video.
Except I had my visor down. And I kept my elbows in. I always figured that I would use the lower handle, and I did. I also was supposed to do this, and I didn't because I thought I had small hands, so I just do this. And I do remember that when I went out, it was like this, and I did fracture the shoulder. It wasn't a big deal, and I remember lying, and he has kind of the same experience. Like, you wake up, and you're in the dunes, and it takes 3 or 4 seconds before you start to go, holy shit, I just got shot down. I was flying a plane in there a minute.
It sucks.
And now,
It's on. 11 o'clock at night, you guys are now on the ground.
Yeah.
so I know that I must have been a little delirious because the first thing I did is back then I did the check thing, and I was missing my gun, I was missing my radio, and I was really pissed about the radio. And I searched the parachute. This is what I mean. I was not thinking real clearly. So I searched the parachute very carefully for my radio. I wanted to find the radio. And I actually didn't let go of the parachute. I was carrying the parachute around.
It was that
Yeah.
90s that had the back hand already.
Yeah, but I didn't switch to the new one.
That's my fault. We had the bad radio, so it's my fault.
I didn't switch.
One guy carried it.
I had the weapon.
I had the old parachute. I don't know. So I'm walking around, and I heard this voice. Oh, is that you? And I'm like, fuck else is out here looking at
You never know.
He was actually in pretty bad shape. I'm going to tell this right through the story. And he was actually in pretty bad shape. And I think I had to help you off with your torso harness. I asked him where the radio, and he said he left it behind. And I'm looking like, okay. And then he told me his shoulder was messed up, and I grabbed his shoulder and tried to reset it. Doctor's on. Back in, and I bet that hurt.
Shit, it's coming along.
You guys heard this story. We basically, the airfield was right there. We could hear the trucks and shit in the airfield. We could hear the airfield, or whatever was on the airfield. We could hear it. It was right there. So the evasion plan was go that way. That way. The base was here. We were
probably
Bad
west.
guys go that way.
That's probably west.
Yeah, that was as far as I was there.
West.
So in any case, he was in pretty bad shape. We went for a while, and it was like a beach with dunes. And one of the things you learn in survival school is you're not supposed to save your water. You drink your water, it's just easy to save it. I guess it's like beer. It's just as easy to save it inside
Never save it.
as it is in the canteen. So I had gone through most of my water, and I think I drank some when I was on the ground. And we're going up the hill, and I had to take a piss. So I leaned to my side, and I pulled up I didn't get up. I was just leaning on my side. I just laid there, and I pissed up. And all of a sudden, I hear him go, "Zool, what are you doing?"
What happened was I was walking, we walked about 15 minutes or something, and I was really drained. These dunes were kind of steep, so I'm trying to climb up this.
So you could walk
with no arms really. And so I'm
You
like,
couldn't
so
walk
I
up the dune.
know.
It's I didn't walk up the dune. You crawled up the dune.
Yeah, it was hard. And
He carrying you or
no, I was completely exhausted, and I sat at the bottom to take a little break while he played. And so I look up and see what's going on up there. And sure enough, I could see some kind of liquid coming. Anyway, I those markings on his face were. That's his story. He told me everything. So we never.
we were dating together?
We were riding together, and when we went up the hill, because you're saying walk, when you went up the hill, I couldn't walk. It was steep enough that you had to shimmy up the hill.
Hand over hip fist, okay.
Yeah, I don't know how I made it up there, but when we got to the top of this little hill, which was only about 10 or 15 feet high, I looked back to where we landed, and there was a truck there, an Iraqi truck. And it's like, in my delirium, I left all my survival gear there, and they were right there, and they were driving, following our footprints in the sand. And I knew we were doomed. And because I looked out where we needed to go toward Jordan, and I saw some trucks driving around out there. And I thought, you know what? I'm tired. Let's take a little breather. That seemed like a good idea at the time. So I couldn't get going. So we laid in a gully, and I said to Zool, "We're doomed. Get out of here." I said, "Zool, if you want to go, go." And that was the bravest thing he ever did. He stayed with me because I didn't want to stay there alone, really. I don't know what happened, but he had the opportunity to get out of there. He crawled in this gully with me. And now the Iraqis are up there running around looking at us, looking for us. And I'm like, how can they not see us? And they couldn't. It was so dark all of a sudden. The parachute flares went down. It was the desert. So they drove this truck up there, and they're looking for us. And I'm looking, and sure enough, the headlights are coming towards us. And I know they're not going to see us, so they're going to go in the gully and just squash us. And I said, Zool.
Yeah, I was lying on top of them, and they're really in the truck. And I actually surrendered. I raised my hand up and waved. And I remember they were shooting. And then they got us. They were pretty rough at first. And they were also, I remember them shooting the guns into the air. And I'm thinking, it wasn't my biggest problem at the time.
Safety first.
Put them on the corner.
I don't think they were wearing helmets, I don't remember.
So we reported them to catch that.
This is part of what we learned from speaking late. My memory is a little more vague than his. I remember they were pretty rough at first, and then someone came and sort of made order out of the chaos. You could talk more because I think
He was right with that machine gun. They were shooting. I thought they were shooting circles around us. I think they were doing that, plus signaling to these other groups that were looking for us. Because Leif told us when these enlisted guys were running the radar at the SAM sites. There was like some money incentive for them. And so they were bringing him, they were running up to the lake and saying, hey, we just shot something down. And he's like, show me some proof. And this went on a couple times. And then one guy showed him our nose gear off the A6. He said, that's it. Show me these guys. Tell me where you found this thing. So Leif jumped in a Jeep and drove to this area. And somehow it was near us. And Leif got out and he this was an angry Iraqi mob that was ready to murder us. And he got these guys back. I remember him yelling, and everybody's yelling, hands up. And I said, I can't move my arm. And he's like, okay, we'll take care of you. I remember that in English. And, I never remember really seeing him, but I know that was him. And they got a group back, and there was protection, and they got a Jeep in there, and we piled in the Jeep, and we drove out of there. And I thought, all right, we got one bad thing under our belt. You know what I mean? Then we get to this next building, and they usher us in there, and it's all lit by candles. And I was like, for me, it looked like a dungeon. I thought, this is it, we're doomed, we're dead. And we got in here, we go down this long hallway, and open up the door, and there's like a gurney. Yeah. So they put us on this gurney, and they're looking us over and stitching us up with our cuts and everything.
Yeah,
I don't know what happened.
I didn't get stitched up in one comment that on Lath's information of them shoes. We planned about 8 tall, so they probably were shooting out tall. And with me, what I remember about the first night was I'm lying in the infirmary. I'm strapped to a gurney, and first I remember that the Saudis were supposed to come by in about 3 hours and bomb the same airfield. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I have basically drawn that whole airfield 9 times. And I don't know where the infirmary is, and who knows where the Saudis are going to drop their bomb. And then the second thing was this guy came out with this big old needle, and he's going to shoot me in the leg with this needle. And I'm thinking, no, it's okay, I'm fine. I'm thinking, what's in this Iraqi needle? And they put the needle in, and it felt good. It's probably morphine, but it definitely felt good. So next morning?
Well, we wake up the next morning, they come in and get us. And this is some stuff that we found out later since we've found Leif. And
Bob, you guys are in the same place?
yeah, we're right next to each other. And there was Saddam Hussein. Well, not yet. Saddam Hussein put for any civilian capturing a dead or alive soldier, he's got a reward. So Saddam Hussein's nephew or cousin found out we had been shot, and he came to get us. He's like, he wanted us to take us back to his village, and they were going to kill us and turn into dead bodies for a reward.
This may have an impact on Scott Spiker too, because the system was geared toward killing the POW, because they turned you over to the civilians killed you, the civilians turned you in, got a reward, and split it with the military guys who had handed you over. And they also had like a political guy on the base. Apparently the political guy was very displeased with what the general did, which was, and by the way, this is kind of hearsay, this is what the general tells us.
Yeah.
I believe him, but you can take it or leave it. But he played it straight and sent us to Baghdad in his auto, or whatever it was, an SUV. And I can remember that they had us blindfolded, and they would put the blindfolds on when we would pass overpass, and they didn't want us to be able to read the overpass. I also remember that they briefed us before that they thought the POWs would probably go to Basra. I didn't know exactly where we were going. I remember that they actually, this urination thing is getting out of hand, but they actually took us to some dude's house in the middle of nowhere. And I had to go to the bathroom, and they let me out and into the house. I went to the bathroom and went back out. And I'm sitting in there. I think it was just this dude's house. He stopped by his parents. We're still together. I'm sitting in the seat, and he's in the back laying down. And I see our helmets, and our helmets are all fiberglass, but it's splintered.
Yeah.
It looks like that. I do remember some old guy with a gray beard, a little, thinner than you. I'm sitting there and I'm just thinking to myself, yeah, no problem, maybe. So then we arrived. I think we just went different ways.
Yeah, we got to Baghdad and took us into the prison. And these guys...
Now, Bob, the whole trip in this truck, you're just laying in the back with they all beat up?
Yeah.
And you had any medical?
Yeah, the night before that.
Yeah, no,
They
nothing.
gave you a little bit?
Yeah,
But you hadn't been, no surgery or anything?
no. Yeah, I went in there, I started walking in, I was like, right on my face.
Okay.
Because I was so exhausted. And they picked me up and took me in there. And I'm like, really being real loud and everything, And he's like, telling me not to be loud. And he's like, they're looking at my arm, they're like, yeah, broken. So I hear this ambulance, or I don't know if I heard it, but they ended up putting me in an ambulance and take me from there, take me to the hospital. And that night, they put me on the operating table, and I'm like, this is it? My arm's getting cut off. You know what I mean? With no anesthesia. And I'm starting to get real anxious. I'm breathing, I feel my breathing's really, it's going out of control. And the guy's like, the anesthesiologist is putting it on. It's like, I want you to recite the U.S. Postal Service motto. Yeah. I want you to, either rain or shine or whatever. I want you to recite it for him. So it kind of relieved me a little bit, and like next thing you know, like the next day I woke up and I was in the hospital room and I actually had like a mirror and I had this huge head on here and I could see it all beat on. So I was kind of fortunate.
One of my comments is that, we'll talk about this in a second, but the treatment depended on where you were. And my thing was doctors are doctors. The Republican Guard, when we were with the Republican Guard, they behaved honorably. There was no, they weren't nice to us, but they fed us. You could see that they would try to take us out, exercise, whatever. So doctors are doctors, and I bet that the doctors want the opinion of American doctors that, yeah, we don't do shoppy work. That's what they're thinking. But it depended on who you were with.
I agree with that, yeah. This guy, I didn't get to know him really. I only spent almost about 5 or 6 days in this hospital, and they kind of didn't bother me too much. And the doctor that did the surgery came in once or twice I saw him, and I didn't really want to develop a friendship with him because I didn't want him to use it against me. So,
Did you go to a hospital in the United States of America?
well, I'm not sure where he got trained, but he's like, they call me Robert. And they're Robert, I don't like this war any more than you do. And when this war's over, we're going to go see a Pink Floyd concert together.
Really?
Awesome. Really? Because you're kind of a YouTube guy, right?
Okay, fine. So mine was different because they took him away. I didn't see him again for a few more weeks, and when I did see him again, he looked like an Ozark mountain man. He had long gray hair
You still saw
not for another 4 or 5 weeks.
after
we got
blowing
separated.
up of the Hilton? Or?
After the blowing up of the secret police place,
Okay.
which we call the Biltmore. That's our name.
Right.
But okay, so I wound up at an airfield, and I believe that because the people who interrogated me the next morning were Air Force fans. I was strapped to the gurney.
This is right after?
Yeah, this is
Okay.
when he was off to the hospital getting operated on.
Mhm.
I was lying, and I could hear
Getting lunch.
AAA going off, and
This is in Baghdad.
this isn't Baghdad, but I wasn't sure it was Baghdad. I didn't know exactly where they taken me. And John Nichol was in the same room. I think we were separated by a partition, and I got to talk to John. John Nichol was a British bombardier.
Was that a guy with the hang downs?
I don't know. I wasn't watching
You
the
weren't part of
news.
that, were you?
Yeah. So, but in any case, he had it worse, man. If you remember, the H hour got pushed by 2 hours. In other words, it was supposed to cook off at 11 at night, and they pushed it until 2 in the morning or something like that. Okay, so his strike was basically a lob at an auxiliary airfield at night. Well, when they pushed it back by 3 hours, he wound up going in the daytime to do the slob at an auxiliary airfield. And they had like MiG-25s there. It wasn't very auxiliary. It was pretty well defended. So he got, what? Tornado. I think Peters was in front of that one.
Did they went low?
But they went low and did a lob, and they got nailed. So that was not good. It was bad. So you know, I felt he got screwed more than I did. That went on for a couple of days. And the Air Force interrogated me that day. They were little like Air Force guys that fooled themselves. I remember the guy, how many times you fly? And I said, no, 1 time. And he said, I fly 3 times. And I'm thinking, I didn't say this, you didn't fly 3 times, you're dead. And they also, one screw up, which maybe helped, because I learned from it, was they had me talking about really innocuous stuff. They were asking about the A6. And so I could just, it was going nowhere. They were getting no information. But remember that famous picture, the A6 cockpit, where they have, you can see the BN seat and all the stuff. And they were asking me, and I got frustrated, and I just said, well, that's a picture of it. And that was kind of a screw up, because they had the picture right there on the wall, and now they could change the topic to something that might be worthwhile. What else did they wanted to know where the B-52s were coming from. I didn't want to tell them they were coming from Louisiana. So I think I made something up. What?
I knew they were coming from Louisiana.
Yeah, they were coming from Barstow. Then they transferred me to the secret police, and things got kind of ugly. We were down in like a bunker, and you could hear bombs going off all the time. And it was a little bit of a ride to this bunker. So it was noisy, big steel door. I wasn't blindfolded all the time. I was kind of beaten around a little bit. They had rubber things that they hit me with.
Were you handcuffed?
Well, when they first took me, they handcuffed me and they handcuffed me really tight. As a matter of fact, my hands were numb for a couple of weeks after that. They beat me with rubber tubes. The scariest one was when they hit you in the throat with their hand.
You didn't tell us about this. You don't want to.
Well, you could tell. I don't have a problem. You could tell that like they knew what the fuck they were doing. They weren't gonna wound me or really kill me.
Leave a mark.
They had a new way to. They've been trained to. I also remember an interrogation where I looked under the blindfold. They didn't blindfold me very effectively, and I could see that they had my knee board cards. So I was like, oh, fuck, okay, well, I can't completely.
Well, no one can read those. Those are Zoom codes. That's not going to make sense. Really wrong.
Well, no, actually, it would have been. I told them how many tall and all that stuff. I could see all the cards there. And then after a couple of days, they told me they were going to kill me. And then they said, instead of killing you, we're going to let you make the film. And so when I was on the way to make the film, I was with somebody else. And maybe at the POW reunion we'll figure out who was that. You want to know here? So I hit myself a little bit.
Yes, you did.
Well, I now know that because I've actually made 2 films. They made like a practice film, and then they made the one that was like at a TV station. And there's another thing, Guppy. You were day 1, we were day 2, day 3 was off, and you were day 4. Your day 4 bombing raid was supposed to be on a TV station, and I know that because I was planning it. And so I'm sitting there on day 4 at a TV station. And it entered my mind. It wasn't the fire closest to my feet, but it did enter my mind that okay, yeah, there's a strike at a TV station. The wounds you see were not inflicted by me on that tape, because they did one beforehand, and later on I got to see both. It was like a couple years later, and I figured out, okay, no, that's the one before I hit myself, and that's the one after I hit myself, and there's not too much difference or any difference I can tell. So that sort of straightens that part out. There's another incident later on.
Compared to, the cover of Newsweek.
Yeah, the Newsweek.
Newsweek was before?
Newsweek. I don't know which tape they took it from.
The Newsweek
one, but I saw them before, I saw them after.
450 knots to 250.
Yeah, and it looked about the same. So, and actually, when I said that I hit myself, that wasn't really the time that I was referring to. This was another incident where I actually, my take on, and this is, I've gotten some calls on this, because you saw just a few days ago a young man, a young Navy lieutenant, got caught in the Arabian Gulf, and people are saying, listen to what he said, not supposed to do that. And my thought on it is, and I've always said this, no, you're not supposed to do it. I've never, I don't apologize anymore, God forgave me, I'm good to go. But you're not supposed to do it. And but what my comment is, and I actually had an interview on Monday, one of my comments is, I'm not sure that was a POW situation, and it wasn't good head work to say, well, okay, no, this isn't, I'm not going code of conduct on you here. I'm going, I had a mechanical failure. Let's just treat this as something that we work through. So I don't know that, it's great, you can make up your own mind. That's going to be how I articulate it. Then they took us to the Republican Guard place, and there the treatment was standard. They fed me, I'm forgetting, but they fed me a piece of what I call hardtack. It's real hard bread. If I had it here today from 1991, I could eat it. And then for lunch, there was rice with vegetables over it, and dinner was lamb. There wasn't a lot of food, but again, they were feeding us 3 times a day. After a couple of days, they started taking us out to do a walk and like a little thing. We could talk. I remember walking by and taking people's names as I go by cells. I remember stopping outside trying to put my head forward. Oh, the bathroom wasn't in the room. That's why I was walking by the cell. Sorry about all. But in any case, so I would walk by people's cells. I remember stopping by Colonel Levelby's cell, and hearing him talk about Colonel Levelby. I remember saying, Colonel, I think you're the man, and just walking down. And he said something to me about, you're all right. Larry Slade was 2 cells down from me, and then there was this Italian guy that was between me and Larry. And the Italian guy was yelling a lot. I don't want to get too far into that, but that was a great mechanism because he basically seemed to go off the reservation, so that he never got bothered at all.
How do you meet you? Just scream for no reason?
What?
I
want to go home. I want to go home. And Larry would talk to him. We're in a cell. You can't. And Larry got taken back for another interrogation one day, and then came back. And then one night, the night was actually, one other thing. I was going to be the strike ops officer, and I had all of the planning materials that I signed for. And by the way, I was the mining officer, and there was just a ton of, because he was the upstairs mining officer, and there was a ton of, and there was a ton of secret information. And my advice to you is, because I remember when I came back, I was worried about all the secret information that I owned, and I probably wasn't as careful with it as I should have been. But I was like, how do I find it? And they just went, oh, don't worry about it. So, got out of that. So, the next one was, they came, and it was the night, my point with that was, I thought that the ground war was supposed to start on H Day plus 18, which was going to be February 4th. So I was really concerned about the fact that I had that information. It didn't start on February 4th, but that's when I thought it was going to start. So I was worried about somehow I would, and I remember very relieved when February 4th came and went. I'm like, yeah. But the night, it was the last day of January, and it came in the middle of the night. Were you in that bus?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about it?
Well, I went from the hospital where it was pretty good treatment. They came in one night and took me to this other place Jeff was at. And
I didn't know he was there.
yeah, I only spent like a couple nights there, and I could see that this is going to be the real world, not the hospital. And and they came in one night and they put everywhere we went, blindfolded, and they took us to this bus, and they piled us in this bus, and they drove us around
I
back.
got hit a few times. It was basically, you could tell it was different guys. And in retrospect, I believe it was, what's the kid's name, Uday, and who's the other one? I think it was Uday, Hussein.
Oh,
Yeah, we
the
believe,
boys.
I think we were turned over.
Beat up their
I
soccer.
don't remember how I came to that conclusion, but we got turned over to some different people. And things, that was the nastiest period of the war.
And yeah, they took us and got us off the bus. We were still in Baghdad, and went up this in this building. I mean, it was at night. It was dark, and they swing open this big, heavy door, and you go into the black pit. You can't even see what's in there. And this door slams, and I was like, this solid steel door, and this was we called it the Biltmore prison.
Later, we didn't call it the Biltmore to, like, talking about, okay.
Yeah.
We named them later.
Yeah, we named them later, but this was Biltmore. And this sort of really, it seemed like the treatment was a lot different. We spent about 3 weeks there. And it was it was always cold, and it was just, I had several blankets. I think they felt sorry for me because they could see I was injured. And, but it was very cold, very dark. It was there was no window other than a window with like these louver shades on it.
It was like blinds, but they were big, thick steel blinds.
So you didn't ever get direct sunlight, and
It's cold as hell.
yeah, and the food was just once a day, 2 pieces of pita bread and some broth, and very limited.
Seriously?
Huh?
Yeah,
Seriously.
that was
Oh,
planned,
yeah.
that was planned starvation.
Once a day.
Yeah, once a day. And I would save pieces of it. The other thing that I remember, I was so cold. The first night I actually considered suicide. Only not real hardcore. I remember putting a bag over my head and thinking about, okay, I could do this. And then I took it off. And then I remember breaking the bag so that, okay, if I ever felt like I was going to do that, I wouldn't have the tool. But I also remember that I was shaking the whole time. And the bad part was it sucked. I was cold. I was really miserable. But I realized that as long as you're shaking, it's just stage 1 hypothermia. You're really not, you're just miserable. You're not, it wasn't life-threatening or anything. So you want to talk about interrogations or anything?
Well, for me, one thing I wanted to cover was my first day in the hospital. Going back to that, I woke up and somebody brought in some food for me, and I was just so depressed. I mean, I couldn't believe it. Here I am all broken up, and I'm a POW, and I couldn't eat this food. I just didn't touch it. And that's when I decided, I made up my mind, I'm going to do what I need to get out of here. I'm going to be very optimistic. And that's when I started making a routine. So I started doing a couple things. One was I prayed a lot. I started praying Hail Marys and Our Fathers, and I was just doing numbers, so counting numbers. And so I was like, well, I'm going to keep track of how many I'm doing. I went back to my hometown in New Jersey, and I was like, started with a Hail Mary, Our Father for like my dad, my mom, my sister, my brother, and then I started going around town, to all my friends' house and said a prayer in front of their house. It just kind of really helped, lift me up. And then, so I just prayed a lot, and I thought of happy times growing up in Metuchen. And then happy times, when I get married. I was supposed to be married while I was in prison. So, my future, I was happy about that. And then, just a small part of me, I thought, I daydreamed. The first couple of days, thought nothing but food. And then after that, just made me hungry. So that's when I moved on to these other lists. But those things just really kept me optimistic that something good was going to happen.
And I've talked to my current preacher, and I've talked to him about this. And I thought his prayer plan was better than mine. And then I had a written roll too. I would count how many times I walked around myself. I remember I never actually prayed to survive. I would always pray to be strong enough. The only thing I had control over was that the way I carried myself. And I prayed for my family, and I prayed for my soul, yada yada. And I would pray over and over again. I had a very distinct routine. But in retrospect, there's a thing in Sermon on the Mount where you're not supposed to repeat the mindless prayers or whatever, the Pharisees. But having that, it's like the code of conduct. Use 10 rules, dude. Remember these rules. And having that, in my opinion, having that, bedrock set of things in a Hail Mary to walk through and think about and guide where your brain goes was probably better than what I came up with.
And the other thing was I had this routine too, with his prayers. And I did my town and everything. When I ran out of that, I was like, all my friends and stuff, I prayed for you guys. Because I knew you guys were going to get us out of this bad situation. So I said the prayer, I went to each stateroom, did the same prayers for you guys. I mean, for what we saw, this was dangerous stuff. You know what I mean? And you guys we were kind of lucky we got out of all that. But you guys, like TJ.
Well,
He threw
food was going together.
Because that was a lot of pressure on you guys. You know what I mean? To go into getting shot at is not fun. You know what I mean? So.
I remember thinking kind of the same thing, that we're missing it. That these people are actually fighting and we're just helpless. I also remember blaming on me because I planned the strike. All right, it was too aggressive. Here I am, if I don't inform that flight school or not. But I also remember I was counting how many new POWs we got, and it stopped. We weren't getting new guys. And the other thing was I could hear the planes overhead. And I'm going to cover this now. This is probably my biggest error of being a POW. But I was hearing the guys overhead, and it sounded like, and maybe an F-117 guy will come around and correct me someday and tell me I'm wrong. But it sounded like they were in a pattern out there. Like they were going over, and then I hear them go around, and then they go over again. And then, like, it would be 2 or 3 times, and they'd leave, and then it would be another break, and then they'd go, and it was like in a pattern. And they were high, and from that I concluded that we had air supremacy and were able to go and fly and drop bombs without people coming down. So that was just my thought on what was
You're right.
and
There were Air Force guys capping.
What?
There were Air Force guys capping over the top. You're right.
That's what you're hearing.
They were capping over the top.
Capping,
of
but
Baghdad.
it was kind of correlated with the bombing. We could hear the
Yeah,
bombing.
that was one.
General Baker's brother
You have to
was
wait.
the wing commander of the F-15s, and they
Yeah.
camped overhead.
My third strike,
Waiting
I
for
went in,
landings.
and I'm going, what the hell is that?
Yep.
And it's Air Force F-15s
Yeah.
over the top of Baghdad. So you're right, you're listening to it.
And my screw up was later on, and this isn't chronological, but they interrogated me. I've done pretty well at not saying, and one of my big ones was I could talk about the rank structure to me, because they have Army rank structure that they knew, and I'd say in these 4 interrogations, they asked me about Navy rank structure, and I could talk about ensign is like lieutenant, first lieutenant, I could go through that for an hour. And when you're talking to them, there's an interpreter and the guy who wants to know the question. So every time they ask you something, the interpreter has to tell the Iraqi guy, the real intelligence guy, what you said. And the biggest, easiest one was they would ask me how many pilots were on the aircraft carrier. And I would go through, okay, there are 12, and I remember if these numbers are still right, but I go, okay, there are 12 A6s in the squadron, and we have 2, do you want pilots and bombardiers? And then, and then you get out to the F-18s, and then you go, wait a second, no, I'm wrong. The F-14 squadron has
I knew
only
it.
10
We
planes.
sent Zul in.
Come and get him! Come and get him!
Keep it going on.
You say it was a war for us.
Okay, so the screw-up was, high point. But the low point was, later in the war, you guys remember we bombed a place with a bunch of civilians in it. We bombed the bunker, right? And killed a bunch of people, civilians. They were really pissed about that.
The milk factory.
Well, whatever it was, they brought me out to interrogate me, and they were saying, did you bomb us? And as soon as it was in Baghdad, and the mistake was, I said, well, no. First, I've been shot down since the first day of the war, and second, the only thing going to Baghdad was F-117s. And what the screw up is, that's very bad to do. And I didn't think about it until after I said it, because I didn't know that there were no F-117 pilots there. And if there had been an F-117 pilot as a POW, he would have been fucked because of what I did. I'm lucky that there were not, but that was a definite, why you should not talk about anything serious. The thing that really got me out of that was saying, well, I've been here.
But you're eating 1 meal a day.
Yeah, well, but okay. So you want to talk about any irritation stuff?
I really bypassed the bunker by going to the hospital. But when I showed up this place, I did get a couple interrogations, and they came in. I remember them opening this big steel door, and there's a guy there in a 3-piece suit with a big leather whip, and I was like, this doesn't seem to go together. I just kind of see I went down to they walked me down there, and they sat me down blindfolded, and they said, we have Jeffrey Norton's song on. He's told us that. Norton. Yeah, so I knew they had him. And they said, I just started with the name, rank, and serial number, you know what I mean? And they started to use the whip on me. So I was like, they would take a little break, and I give them the name, rank, and serial number, And then at one point, they were like, well, what's your middle name? I don't have it. Again, with the whip. And I convinced them I don't have a middle name. One of the few people. And they pressed on with this thing, burning, using cigarettes, just using this whip. And I'm just kind of holding everything together, trying to protect myself as best I can. And all of a sudden, the door just starts, there's a lot of commotion going on in this room, and people are coming and going, and doors are slamming. And I know what's coming next, the Vietnam ropes. And I'm thinking, I don't know if my arms can take it. You know what I mean? So they started on to, well, what was your mission? So, once I decided I'm going to give them something. So I gave them a little bit of information, and then I would just go with, I knew they knew where we were shot down, so that's no secret. And I said, flying an A6 with the Zool man, and so I'd give a little bit of information, then I'd stop and say, I don't know. I'd take as much of that whip I could take, and then press on a little bit more, give them a little bit more, and then all of a sudden, they moved on to how many planes on the carrier? They seemed to really go by, they went by the whole strike. Didn't really cover anything. And I decided I'm not putting anybody's life in jeopardy. So I didn't give them anything specific. There was a lot you could tell, I realized. And just with the carrier and stuff like that. There's a lot of information. I didn't want them coming back to me the next day and say, hey, Bob, we got some more questions for you. So I just did the best I could. And after a while, we left there. They took me back. I was like, all right, now I got to evaluate what just happened. What do I got to cover myself for? We didn't have any cover story. I mean, we're not going to get shot down, right? So we didn't talk about it. We probably should have.
Well,
but
that happened twice in my lifetime.
Bob, is it true that when you came out of the hospital, there were rules that they couldn't touch anything they'd fix? Your shoulder and all that stuff?
I don't think they had any rules.
That's what I heard that was kind of one of the, because they're all Western doctors, some trained in.
They had no idea what was going on.
Oh, okay.
I had no cast on. All I had was this, they put metal in this arm and this arm. And all I had was stitches. The stitches, the skin was just growing over them. I was trying to get somebody to take them out. Yeah.
How soon after was it, after your operation?
45 days. I didn't get stitches taken out until the end of the war.
Yeah, so.
You know, the skin was growing over. So,
Did it take out in comfort?
No, I think his question, Bob, was how long before the interrogation after?
When you got done, and they handed you over to the assholes, pardon my, did they do anything to anything that had been done to you?
no, yeah, they didn't
Okay.
intentionally do anything to that. So I was like, we could really resolve this thing quickly by just going right to my arm. You know, instead of, I don't think they realized, you know,
Let's go in there.
It's here or here, they didn't know it.
Jimmy Anderson, Virginia Beach, Virginia. Blah, 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 phone number.
It's all about.
So two more quick interrogation stories. One was, I remember being interrogated outside of a door where someone else was being, I remember waiting to be interrogated outside of a door where someone else was talking. I didn't realize that he was alive, definitely, until after we got blown up, which is still a week or so away. But I remember someone else was talking about finding things on the radar on the Twitter or something, and I remember listening to them and going, okay, well, I'm just going to say the same shit that he is. And that's what I did. The other one was they were telling me to be on or not, because that thing about making a mistake and then correcting yourself, remember, they're working 10-hour days too. You can go through 6 hours and not, just, okay, and they don't know how many planes are on the boat. They can look it up. But
Google.
They couldn't Google it yet. One interrogation, I remember they brought me in and they hit me in the head, and they were pounding on my fingers, and then they had a gun. Some guy comes in and you hear him cock a gun, and you haven't told us enough, we're going to kill you. And so what I remember about it was, this place was kind of dirty and damp, and it was a freaking dungeon, right? And I'm in a room with a window, and there's a rug. And I got my blindfold here, I can see the rug. And it's bright enough that there's a window. And I'm thinking, this is the nicest room that I have been in, since I got to this facility. There's no way they shoot me here. Take me out to the because you can see a courtyard. Take me out to the courtyard and kill me there.
They're gonna mess the rug.
They're not going to mess up the rug. The other one, I got interrogated. I want to go into this, but just fact, I got interrogated, and later on, there was in the Rocky Journal said that I almost got executed. And I don't know. I have no idea that that's true. I kind of discounted it, but I got interrogated a lot about being Jewish because of my name. And they were asking me,
God.
They thought,
That sounds
Those are.
they were worried. What it was they were worried there were Israelis that somehow
they couldn't believe South
flying
Americans were
for
doing this.
the.
That was my thing. They couldn't believe Americans were doing it. They thought Israelis must be the ones doing this. And so they thought we were Israelis. And I probably had 3 or 4 interrogations where they threatened my life and told me I was Jewish. And I'm saying, okay, my mom's Methodist, my dad was raised Lutheran, yada yada. But Alright, so now it's a little more serious. A little more serious one, of course. When they did that film, the first film, the way I think of it now was I wasn't brave enough, and I knew that if they did another film, I wasn't brave enough to tell them to go fuck themselves. So they took me one night and they shaved me. And my conclusion was that they were going to make another film. So that night, when they put me back in my room, I hit myself in the head. And it's, you start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But I'm hitting my eyes. And then you do a G-lock move. And your eyes will swell up and close like that. And I could almost do it, very precisely. So that this one was completely
How
closed.
come you know
Do it
that?
again.
What?
Why
Because he's.
why do you know that?
Because he's Zool.
He's
He practiced it on the ship. I used to drink the offshore. I don't know anything about it.
No, I started out without thinking of the G-lock thing, just trying to get my eyes to swell up. And then I thought, if I do, so the next one was going to try and break my nose. And I had my hand like this, and I tried the same thing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that. So I only did that like a couple of times, and then I stopped.
Yeah.
But the next morning, they took me down, and they took the blindfold off, and there was a very well-dressed Iraqi army guy there, and there was a camera, and they were getting ready to do another film. And the guy looked at it like a concerned look on his face, and then he's looking at the other people like, who the fuck is this guy out? And I told him I fell. I think they probably knew what I did. But at any rate, they brought me back up to my room, and I was like, that was the best morale boosting. Go screw yourself, but I figured out a workaround. And I was going to work. So I had to keep my eyes going up for a couple of days, and my face grew back, but there was no harm, no foul. And then you guys remember the ground war started. I'll tell my part of this beginning of the story, and you can tell yours, Bob. Actually, why don't you do it? The ground war started on February 24th. And on the night of February 24th,
Yeah. Well, up to this point, we're still in the Biltmore, and typical at the beginning of the war, it was more of the air raid sirens going off, and we could actually kind of see through this shades thing, these SAMs going up against the airplanes, and then you could hear the bombs hitting all over the place. And after a couple of weeks, the bombs were hitting, and then you hear the siren going off, so you could see that their defenses were really.
oh yeah, that's right.
deteriorating.
At first the sirens, then the bombs, then after a while, bombs, then sirens.
Yeah, it was kind of deteriorating, and every night you'd lay down and you could hear the bombs hitting all over Baghdad. And way over here, and then a ton of bombs over there.
Spirits at all?
Oh yeah, I liked it, you know what I mean? I liked it. But this night it was like, oh, these bombs are coming close, and I could hear this one comment, and I was like, all right, whoa, this thing's coming close. And it gets louder and louder and louder, and all of a sudden, boom, the whole building just shakes. And I'm like, they just bombed this whole building. And it was so pitch black, I couldn't see what was happening, but I was certain I was looking down 3 stories here. Because this building just shook, there's no way it's still standing. And I'm like, whoa. And then I hear another bomb coming. And I hear it coming.
Somebody yelled incoming.
Yeah.
Make it clicking sound.
Yeah, and you know it's coming close. And the same thing, and it happened 4 times. And the F-117s dropped 2,000 bombs in this building. And they fortunately put a delayed fuse on it, so it detonated on the 1st floor. We were on the 2nd floor. What's up? It was part of a military complex. And I don't know, we kind of heard about what it was, but it was a military complex. They didn't know we were there.
They figured it out pretty quick. I later talked to General Lawson, and he said he got called that night. And he said, maybe they figured it out from SIGINT, or maybe it was just one of those, the right hand and the other on the left hand. But they figured it out pretty quick. One of the things was it was very cold. It was February, the nights were long, and if you fell asleep early in the evening, you would wake up and not know when the sun was coming up again.
Yeah, no idea.
I always wanted to stay up late, and I would pace around my room. I used to know how many steps, but I forgot. but then I would count, and I would pray, and I would listen to the planes come in. And the planes would come in, and I remember my thoughts were, oh, this is going to be close. And then, this is going to be really close. And there wasn't anything I could do, and then, boom, and I saw a flash. What side were you on? Were you on the, well, I saw a flash. Did your steel grate blow in? Okay, so you were probably on the other side. But we had these 100-pound steel, you know, more than that, but they were bolted in. The window was probably about this high, is that about right?
Yeah.
And then there were probably 4 thick steel Venetian blinds, and it probably was about that width.
Yeah.
And they were bolted into the brick. And when that first one hit, it blew that thing. It blew me toward the wall. I didn't hit the wall. And it blew that steel grate thing right out of the window and down into my cell. It was bright. I flashed with my kind of thing. The biggest thing was my ears. I thought I was checking for blood on my ears. Really, it was a compression thing. And then it hit like I did like a cannonball thing. I don't know. It wasn't fetal position. It was curled up, you know, position. It hit 3 or 4 times. I don't remember 4 or 3. And then I remember on the second one, someone yelled incoming. And then the next thing was I looked out the window, and I remember, wow, this looks like Pink Floyd Animals because it had like a dark industrial kind of sky thing, and so okay, that's kind of a bizarre place. But I actually went. People saw me on the ground and said something to me. I don't remember exactly what. I went back inside, and then eventually I was thinking that this building is coming down, and I do not want to be in it. So I went up. We were on right above our floor was like an indentation, and then it went up another floor. And I went out the window, and I could stand on my ledge out the window. We were 3 stories up, and I could reach up here. And I was scared of a lot of things, but I'm not scared of heights. And I grabbed and I pulled myself up. And then I pulled myself up to the top floor, because what I was thinking was, you know how elevator shafts have a door in them, and then you can get in the stairwell? And I remember being on the roof. I think that end of the building looked like it was down, but I don't know for sure. And I looked, there was an elevator thing, like on the top of most buildings, they have the elevator equipment thing, and I knew it was an elevator because they took me up in an elevator. So I went over to it, and I started walking around it, and I walked around 3 sides. The 4th side is out facing it was on the side of the building, and there's no door. And I'm thinking, what kind of a rooftop doesn't have a door in the elevator thing? And all right, so I couldn't find it. And then my next thought was there was a ventilation shaft thing, and I took the top off, and I started going down that, like shimmying down. And I only got a little ways, and I was thinking, you know, I'm pretty weak, and if I get stuck in the bottom of this thing, they're going to be pissed at me. So I went back up, I went in my room, I got real anxious again, I curled up a little ball, and I said, okay, we'll try this again. So I walked up, and this time instead of going onto the roof, I went into the windows of the floor above me. And I went into like the one I got nowhere. I went into the second one, and there was a door, like, you know, like a doctor's door where they have a door in the bottom and a door in the top, and it's separate. I remember that. And I'm turning, and I'm thinking, who the hell, what kind of building can't you open the door from the inside? You know, usually you can't lock the door, you usually unlock the door from the inside. And I couldn't unlock this door. So I gave that up, and then I went in the next room, which was the last one, and I went in that, and it was like a false ceiling or whatever, wires and stuff, and there was a lot of trash all over the place. So I went in, and I said, nothing here, and I went over here. By the way, because there was, then I went and tried the left side, and I fell down, and then I started going back up, and I realized, wait a minute, steps. I'm in the stairwell. So I turned around, I went back down the stairwell, and I had seen what the hallway between the cells looked like. They had me out there without the blindfold. And so I went out into the hallway, and I saw it, and then I said, okay, you know, I'm in the hallway, I'm going to find the keys, I yelled at everybody, and largely because it was one of those deals like, not even Bob, and I don't know that I want to venture out of here without taking everybody with me. Just as I was saying that, a bunch of people started yelling at me. And it was like civil defense guys or whatever, and they had guns, and I just said, PW, PW, and I went down, flat on my face with my hands up. I heard the things come back or whatever. They picked me up, they threw me in another cell, like not the one that I had been in for however many weeks. I don't think they had the keys, but they put me in another cell. And then they took me out, and they took me downstairs, and we walked downstairs, and I remember like there was water on the ground, and some guy just belted me, and my reaction was to just go down. I don't think he knocked me out. I just decided that was my strategy. I was just going to go down and hit me. And they handcuffed me, and I was actually out. He took me across the parking lot, and I was actually out by a door, by a car, and the guy, I was like lying here, and the guy said, just lie there, don't move. And he stood in front of me, and all these people were walking by with guns, like everybody and their brother in Baghdad had a gun. And so the idea was, was one of these people going to shoot me. And I think the guy genuinely did protect me. My other thought after a while was, oh shit, because I was trying to get out of the building because I didn't want him to go down with me in it. My other thought was, what if it goes down now? And how do I explain being the only guy that wasn't in the building? So that was another worry. And eventually, it took hours, and they got us out. And it wasn't just POWs in there, because there was a nut case in there too. And there was a nut case on the bus. And one of the things, they didn't really have a plan. It took hours, they had no fucking clue what to do. I was sitting next to the guy in credit card in a Marine, 88 guy, that had gone down, and I got a conversation with him. And eventually they drove us to what you guys know as Abu Ghraib. We called it Joliet, looked just like a regular prison. You want to take it from there?
Well, yeah, Jeff got out of there, and they evacuated most of us. And because there was one room with all these keys, and you hear them open the doors and everything. And then all of a sudden, there was all this screaming going on down the street. And these guys opened besides her. And they, you just hear them dropping everything, everybody around. Complete silence. And we start talking, that guy John Peters was across from me. And I was like, we were talking a little bit. He's like, hey, what's going on with this thing, with the war? And he's like, hey, the war's actually going pretty well from what you guys have seen. And it lifted my...
He got somebody else talking?
Yeah, probably somebody else.
How soon was this after you got shot?
This was February 24th. So we got shot down on the 17th. So 14th was H day plus 18. So
you've
add
been
10,
in the
add 20 to
hospital
that,
for
and you're at H day plus
a week.
38.
A week. Really?
It was 5 weeks.
Here's one other calculation where I was at. Correct. Very correct. My thought was that once the ground war starts, it's going to take 2 days for both sides to figure out who won, another 2 days to call a halt to it, and then it's going to take 3 or 4 days after that. I guess the ground war started on the 28th, the war ended on February 8th, 28th, 4 days later, and we got out, 3 or 4 days after that.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, like I said, these guys dropped everything, and so there was this screaming going on, and I talked to somebody across from me. He said the war's going pretty well, and somebody else was talking down a couple cells down. He's an Iraqi civilian, and he was suspect of something, so they threw him in jail. And he spoke English. Hey, what's going on? Oh, no, they just yelled that the bombers are coming back. So they dropped everything and ran. So there were like 5 of us that they couldn't find a key to the door to get us out of there. So we spent the night there. Unfortunately, the bombers didn't come back. And sunrise comes up, they open up my door, and the guy comes in and he's like, grab your blankets. So I grab all my blankets with me, and he had some food with him. He says, put this in your pocket. Stuffed in my piece of
The last couple of days before the bombing, they were feeding us a little.
Yeah.
I don't know what the deal was with that or why, because the war wasn't about to end. some reason they were feeding us,
Yeah.
they were giving us more food.
So we go down the stairs, these five of us, and they're leading us, and we're all in the basement. We go out the
You're in
door.
the same building?
I was out, yes, we were in the same building. I
He
was,
left the night before.
I was out of the building, I was the only one in the street for hours. And then a bunch more people came down, filled up a bus. And when I was on a full bus of people sitting next to Craig Berryman, and they took us to Abu Ghraib, and they put us in a cell. I was handcuffed behind my, with my hands behind my back, and it was getting kind of painful. And I remember David Everly started yelling at the guards. And first, the other thing was these were like regular guards. They were prison guards. They weren't the secret police guys who had been abusing us. And so the dude, Everly starts yelling at me to take my handcuffs off. And I got my handcuffs out under my butt and out in front of me now. And he said, take off the handcuffs. So this dude's idea was, okay, they get a chisel with like a hammer, right? And they start banging on the thing to get and they're not banging on the chain, they're banging on I don't even know if it was a chain, but they were banging on actually, this is, the one guy goes like this, but they're banging on the chain, and to be honest with you, it hurt, but it didn't hurt that bad. It wasn't the worst thing that, as things go, and they worked at this for quite a while. And my things were bleeding. I actually have a scar from it, it's a little tiny scar, but my wrists were bleeding a little bit, and then somebody walks in with a key and unlocks the door. But the other thing was, like him, they stuck us in, they didn't have a plan. We were studiously separated for the whole, however many, like we could talk a little bit at the first Republican Guard prison. We were studiously separated at the Biltmore. And here they just threw us into a cell, all of us together. And we could sit and talk. And we talked for hours, and there were dudes, because there were two waves. The first wave was the guys at the beginning, and then as the ground war was about to get going, they were flying A-10s. So then that was when the A-10 guys was later, so they knew more. They would say, you were, they don't know you're dead. They showed them coming to your parents on TV. You, this or that, and they told me, yeah, you're on a magazine.
You're on the government Newsweek.
And the other thing I remember is they fed us dates. And man, the best meal. They were feeding us 2 pieces of pita bread and a little, some kind of broth for weeks. And these guys gave us dates. Those were good. Want to do the Pac-Man story?
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, what happened was, at this Biltmore, I just want to cover this real quick. I with this group of like 5 of us, and we're going down out of this Biltmore prison that just been bombed the night before. And we're all in a line, and I'm in front, and this guard that's leading me, he's like, we're walking through the parking lot now, and he's like, he stops, he says, look at those cars over there, see the cars? And there's a parking lot, and all these cars are burned out from the bombing and everything. He said, that's my car. I drove to work yesterday, that's my car over there. And it's like, I didn't know what was going to come of this, but these guys, they didn't want the war either, you know what I mean? They're just going about their business. And we spent a little bit of time there, and they finally came and got us, and then took us to this prison that Jeff was talking about. And they didn't know what to do with it, so we all had our blankets. So put us in a room like, an outdoor courtyard like this. And it's everybody.
I spent the night in a room, and then they moved me to the outdoor courtyard. Yeah. And I think they took you to the outdoor courtyard.
Yeah. And so we showed up, and they told everybody to sit down in a little spot so you couldn't communicate. And put the blankets over. So, the blankets you could see through the hole and stuff. It's kind of fun because there's all these clumps, all in the courtyard. And for some reason, I forget exactly how it happened, but
I started moving.
Zool was moving, I think. One of the guards, wasn't happy seeing this little clump move. So I just goes over there, and this guard just kicks it. And I hear this boom. I was like, that sounded like Zool.
I remember
think
really
they saw us.
confused, very casual.
Really, is that the first
How
time?
you doing? Yeah, well, I had,
Did you run
no,
into each other?
I had not, yeah, we had not had contact. I had not known that he was alive, or what happened to him, until we're in these little things, and I'm getting in trouble for moving or peering out on what they thought. And then I remember he said, "Who was that you?"
Got
I asked him how you doing. He
Sounds
said,
like, we'll do that.
And then it was kind of cool, this prison, it was different, they came and got us, we all got prison cells, some got 2 to a room, I got 1, I was by myself, and I'm like in my routine, okay, new place, so I'm going to start my prayers and doing this, all of a sudden I hear this tapping on the wall, and it's like, am I hearing that right? And sure enough, it was a guy doing the tap code to me, and I'm like, whoa, so I was like, okay. I think I remember how this thing goes. And unfortunately, the Air Force and Navy is a little different. There's a
Anyway,
so I'm like listening to it, and I'm like, it's kind of making sense, but it's not. So I'm doing some, and he's kind of tapping back, and it's not making sense completely. There's no.
No.
There's a difference. So,
No, the square was like this.
yeah.
It was
And
long. We were on the 2nd floor. The stairs were over here. There was a 1st floor down there, and the bathroom was over here. I was here. Bob was here. So and the bathroom was not inside the room. So they had to lay you out, and they did not lay you out often enough. I used the walls frequently. And I smelled so bad I used to move to the other side of the room so I couldn't smell myself. So I would run down the hall. I had to go here. I'd run over here, across, and when I ran this way, I could see Bob. And that was the first time I'd seen him. And I remember thinking, it was really hilarious. Because he had like the little gray hair and he had a pointy beard. Yeah, we were just disgusting.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at him. I don't remember when we talked.
Well, I think I had said something.
And that's the first time you'd seen him since you've been shot down.
Yeah.
Because when we were on cruise, we went into Port Haifa, we went down to Jerusalem, and these street vendors wanted to sell us stuff. He's like, "Hey, fat man." So when I saw Zul run by, I was like, "Hey, fat man."
That is awesome.
But this place was pretty good, like, I was doing the tap code with this guy, and we were getting pretty good with it, and then we also were like, there was a window in the back of our cell, once again with louvers, you couldn't see up, I said, hey, let's try and talk him through the window, and it was Dale Story, A-10 pilot, he'd been shot down, and he was very good, he was flying for United for a while, and I learned a lot from him. It was good to communicate with him. And all of a sudden, we hear the door. We're on the 2nd floor, and it's the 1st floor. The door opens up, and all of a sudden, I hear a bunch of footsteps come running up the stairs. And so we scatter, get away from that window. And they go running by our cells. And they go to Larry's slave, and they open up the door, and I hear them. They kind of yelled out, "Is this it?" or something. There was something going on. And Larry is out there. He didn't have the louvers or something. He's waiting to communicate with somebody across the leg. And the Iraqis saw this, and so they decided to pummel him. And so after he got pummeled, I talked to Dale. I said, let's take a break on this. Let's give it some time. A couple days, but the food was getting better. We got three meals.
Still very cold. And the reason I remember it was very cold. Different people are different.
But Larry Slade was with Bruce Devon.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, Larry was just. Larry might have been in the cell next to me. I'll see him in a month. I'll ask him. We'll try. But they put Jeff Peters in my cell after I was by myself for a while, and they put Jeff Peters in my cell. And I do remember that when we slept, we hugged. It was freezing. I had yellow PW uniforms, which were what we had on when we got released. And actually, after the escapade at the night of the bombing, they replaced my jumpsuit because it was black. It was because I'd been crawling around and all the stuff and replaced it. And the other funny thing about that was they gave me you have these Ked sneakers, right? And they gave me the Ked sneakers. And then they came by and they took the shoelaces away so that I wouldn't kill myself. And then, but I remember Jeff Peters actually disturbed being with another person. He had his routine, and he didn't like. He told me, I have my routine, Jeff. I don't like,
It's nothing personal.
not so
sure.
personal, but
Well, my stop.
But I was happy. I was happy with another person. And he made a little chess set and we played, and that only lasted a couple days.
Yeah. Speaking of the clothing, I went to the hospital first, so they gave me a tunic to wear, which is a dress. I was like, I don't want to wear a dress. Give me a uniform or something. And it was weird. I was wearing this
Sensitive
dress.
guy.
But before they turned us over at the end, they did give me the regular yellow number. But the food was getting better and everything, and the bombing seemed to stop. And then
One day it got really dark.
Oh, yeah, we could see out the bathroom window. All the oil rigs were burning.
Something. It was either that or just a sandstorm.
Yeah.
So one day,
Exactly what Abu Ghraib from downtown.
Where?
south side, halfway to the airport, I
I
think.
want to say on the west side, maybe.
Yeah, south toward the west, but
Yeah.
halfway to the airport. Well,
It was all oil burning.
if somebody's got a
It was
smartphone, you can look that up and tell them.
Yeah.
So basically, the confines of Baghdad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Suburb.
They came and got a bunch of us out of there, and it's like, what just happened? Where are they taking these guys? Something's going on. And a couple days later, they came. There was only like 7 of us left, and they put us in a van. And I'm sitting blindfolded again, and the guy's like, I could see he had been dressed in a suit. He's like, hey guys, war's over. You guys are going home. We won the war. And he's like,
You were in
being real friendly to us.
You were in Abu Ghraib when they told you that?
That's where we got.
Abu Ghraib was Joliet. And then they moved us to that other, moved me to that other place.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. A bunch of you guys came and they took you away. I was still there.
You were still, I didn't know that.
Mhm.
So he was still at Joliet, they moved me to another place.
Yeah.
And my food got better too, but by that time I was having a problem eating it. I couldn't hold any food down.
We got on this van, and the guy was real friendly, and I was like, I didn't think the war, I didn't think they won, but I didn't say that, obviously. But he's like, he's being real friendly to us. He's like talking to the guy next to me. Hey, what's your name? And he told him, he's like, do you have a family? Yeah, I'm supposed to have a baby any day. His wife was pregnant. And then he got to me, he's like, hey, what's going on with you? Where are you from? Yeah, I'm supposed to be married. I was supposed to be married yesterday. You know what I mean? He had all the invitation printed up and everything. And they took us to a room, like 7 of us in there. And we just kind of spent a couple nights in there. It was dark and everything. We talked a lot. That's where they started to look us over a little bit. And then they came and they got a couple of us out and took us to one more place, another prison. And it was kind of cool, things were getting better. And we were driving down, I'll never forget, through Baghdad, and I could kind of see out the window and stuff. And they had those 2 swords, in the main street. You drove through that thing. And we were near it, and it was kind of cool. And the next day, they came, I finally got rid of that dress. And I put on got to put on my clothes, the regular clothes. And they took us out in the courtyard and said, you guys are going to be home soon. And there's Zul. So I saw Zul for the first time.
Really?
As far as like right next to him.
Did you believe him or did you think it was a trick?
I sensed that things were getting better. As each group said it was over. It was over.
I wasn't told, I was in the same place I was 4 days, I wasn't told that the war was over. but the AAA had stopped. And I tried to pay attention to which direction we were going when they moved me. I didn't know whether they weren't flying or whether they just moved us far enough away from Baghdad that we couldn't hear it. And I remember I was getting pretty sick, and they gave me a shower, no hot water, with and they shaved me again. And this time, I didn't beat myself up. I thought, okay, this could be it. And they had in him, I remember Marissa Rapp-Neely was sitting there too. And that was the first time I'd seen a woman. I didn't know where that came from. And I also remember thinking that the transfer was going to be like one of the scariest parts. Because that's, when change happens, things can. So they put us on the bus, they blindfolded us, and then after a few seconds or minutes, they said, take the blindfold off. And when I took my blindfold off, that's when I knew the war was over. Because I looked around, I was in Baghdad, or in a pretty big city, and I hadn't heard bombing for 4 days. Which meant that, okay, this is for real. When they took us to the Hilton, they gave us candy.
The Hilton?
No, Hilton, no, where did they
I
take us?
don't know what it was, but it was a hotel.
You can look it up.
You know, we got there on this shuttle bus that took us, a hotel shuttle van or something, took us, and, we just got off fat, dumb, and happy, unbeknownst to what was going on, really. But CNN is there. And I was like, these camera crews were there. And they're filming us getting off of it. And that was the first time anybody saw me. Because I was MIA the whole time.
That's right.
So my family's watching it back in the States. It's like, is that Bob? So it's like, really, it's kind of cool. And we came down there, and sure enough, and then we got in this big banquet room, and we were just kind of hanging out there with other, like some Brits and some the Americans.
It's only half.
Turned us over to the Red Cross, and then we got into two of their vehicles.
Well, the Red Cross guys, I remember the Red Cross guys said, be quiet.
Yeah.
Okay, the war did not go well. You need to be cool. Okay. And then they took us out, and I remember I was worried about Bob, because there were people closing in, and I was behind Bob, and they gave us jackets, civilian jackets.
Yeah, the press.
You look really good.
Give you their jacket.
Actually, it was one of the British SEALs had this jacket, and he was swimming through rivers and stuff with it behind the lines. And they put it on me. They grabbed it. He still had it for some reason. They put it on me, and he came over to me. He's like, you know what? I've been through a lot with this jacket. Make sure I get it back.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And you got it in your home right now.
I sold it.
I sold it on eBay.
So the Iraqis didn't mess with the Red Cross because they had done a lot of service returning folks back and forth between Iran and Iraq during that war. They drove us across Iraq to Jordan. We took back roads often and small bridges because the big bridges were blown out. Saw some of the effect of the war blown out.
I did.
Saw some of the blown out trucks and stuff, dead people. It was harrowing. And I hadn't meant for this to drift into potty humor so often. But they offered me beer. They offered us beer. And I was like, I promised myself a lot of things. One of the things I didn't promise myself was that I'd quit drinking. So I had 2 Amstel lights on the way across Iraq. And by the time we got toward the Jordanian border, I was dying. And I'd asked the Red Cross at the border where we had to stop, could I get out and, fertilize their land? So what happened was...
It goes far away.
What happened was that the Jordanians were not happy to see us. They were pissed. And the Red Cross guys were getting a little bit nervous. And so it was plain that there was some tension there, right? And the Red Cross guy says to me, are you sure you have to go? And Bob just jumps in and says, no, he's fine. By the time I got out, I was blue. I was trip back, and then they put us in a helicopter. And I remember thinking, okay, we get through all this, we're going to die in a Jordanian helicopter. And then we got on a plane. It was a C-141. I remember my theory was that they were going to take us back. There's no way the sink wasn't going to see us before we left. So they had to take us back to Saudi Arabia. I figured we'd go to Riyadh. We ended up going to the USS Comfort in Bahrain.
Do you remember the flight? What we did on the flight?
Oh, well,
We flew over to Saratoga.
Yeah.
Yeah, we called you guys.
No, we called them on the radio. But that was the trip from Bahrain to Sicily.
No, it wasn't.
Was it? Was it? Okay, yeah, because I knew.
I was sitting here watching.
I was there.
You were over.
They did call. Somebody called, said they were
I
on
knew
that
the
airplane.
frequency and I knew the code.
I called down the river, he's on the radio.
We talked to Steve.
Hey.
Yeah.
No, you did not. You talked to me. I was airborne. I talked to you guys. I talked to somebody on that airplane, and I was like, holy shit, those guys are on that airplane.
I used
That's so cool.
the Admiral's code. I used E's thing.
Yeah, well, good for him.
And I remember I talked to his chief of staff, who I forget his name. But it'd be good to get back. Who did you? What?
Oh, I was just telling Sned, we got a couple pictures I think would be good to see.
Oh. And the other thing, when we finally got there, apparently we smelled very bad.
Yeah.
Go back one.
I was going to say, how long did you go without a shower?
Yeah, 45 days.
No, actually, I got a shower like tonight before we
I
left.
didn't go out shower.
After this,
Even in the hospital?
The what?
After that, let's.
I was doing something overhead. You didn't see. It's like those guys came out. I was the guy in the airplane.
So yeah, we could. I
Yeah, we
didn't remember the details of who I talked to.
Yeah.
I thought it was the flight from one is
Yeah, no.
He knows.
So that's what we could see. And that wasn't necessarily our cell block,
Yeah.
but if it was, the end was you couldn't cross. I was on the right, and then Bob was very close to you, just to your right where you're looking. Where you're looking from.
That's why I said that. Freedom. But yeah, there's some good pictures coming up, I think. Some of you guys will like it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Where- What was different from the Air Force one?
Is it the C and a K or something?
But you could still.
Or the Q? It's definitely different. It was different. And to be honest with you, we were no different than you guys. You could have handled yourselves well too. You know what I mean? Just had to make up your mind the first day what to do.
Not much.
Not much, yeah.
Yeah, this is when Amman, Jordan, we had just been turned over to the Jordanians.
Really?
Why were the Jordanians upset?
They're Sunni Arabs, and they were not happy with the fact that we were
They hear about bombing Sunnis?
more bombing Iraq. They were,
Oof. We didn't have Dougal in the picture though. I don't know where you were.
It's Bahrain, he was in a bar.
Were you in the, yeah, it was these two. But remember, they didn't know when they got detailed to it whether they're going to be live guys up or dead guys up.
Yeah, they were going to escort us home with you.
All, what was it, 12?
What's that?
The U.S. people that was the Brits went to Crete. When we went to Bahrain. Total. I forget.
Yeah, it was like 21 Americans, I think, and 90 slaves. Oh, yeah, there's Laith Munir, the general, Iraqi general. This was a couple of years ago.
be a little like this. It probably won't be as quite as engaging because you're kind of an easier, better audience to try and do stuff. But we'd love for you guys to.
Yeah, we'll let you know when we're gonna do it.
And it'll probably be toward the end of the war, when the war ended in March. I would also say, you know, the way we're going to present a couple of places. What Bob said is you see a lot of these war stories, and you know, whether it's Doolittle in the old days or the one that just opened 13 days ago, it's these guys are big, heroic, did things that, and our approach to it, and Leif is kind of on board. He's got some stories too. He says that helicopters came that night and he saw lights. Okay, and remember, he was getting bombed, so he's got some shit to tell too. And our thing was, you know, you won't believe what happened on the way to the forum. That's kind of the way we're approaching it. Is that, look, we had good times. We had, you know, things that we didn't do as well as we would like to have done. But you know, we held in there, and just the fact that you're dedicated to your duty, you have a belief in a higher power, if you will. You have a code of conduct, and you just hang in there. His prayer, his positive thing was a little different than mine. Was more stoic. Of okay, just control yourself. You can control you. That was my optimism. But you know, it was just a really wacky experience. That you know, some of the stories we've been telling, and we kind of want to make it more of a black comedy than a hero takes the villain.
Can you take about 2 minutes and talk about Leif and why he's here and how he got here?
Leif Undir was a general in the Iraqi army, and he had flown in the Iraq-Iran conflict. I should look up the dates of that. I'm guessing 84 to 88.
7-year war.
Thousands killed. When we went in 2003 and cleaned out Iraq's army, which was Sunni dominated, the Iranians were able to exert a lot of influence with a lot of people on the ground in and around Baghdad with the militias, and they started killing off the Iraqi pilots who had flown against them in that Iran-Iraq conflict. They were killing families, pilots, and Hussein Mubarak was a Air Force pilot, and that's his lineage. He offered, and this is the way Leif puts it, he offered it as a courtesy that he would get to. So he moved to Egypt to get out from under getting killed in Iraq. I don't want to go. There might have been some medical reasons that had him move from Iraq or from Egypt to the United States, and I don't want to get into it. That's his personal business. He's healthy now, playing tennis every day, and his son served in the other part of it is you know what happened in Iraq, right? But his son served with an intelligence unit in the war in Iraq.
For the U.S.
For the U.S. And he has become a good friend. And my other point, when he talks, and this is back to what we just said a minute ago, it's kind of a black comedy. Do what you control the way you carry yourself. And I've said this to Leif, look, I'm not saying you did a great thing, right? But you did what you were supposed to do, okay? You did what you were supposed to do. Sometimes harder or more or less hard, and that's kind of what we tried to do what we were supposed to do. The situation was a little above and beyond.
Thank God he took care of you guys.
Yeah.
So Bob and Jeff, you guys have been up here, it's been a tremendous show. I just have 3 words for you guys. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Absolutely priceless, and I want you to know that when you guys were shut down, that the guys in this room that were going on strikes were saying, this is for Bob and his rule.
Appreciate it.
We want to pay you back. Thank you so much.
Cardinals 26, Packers 20 in overtime. All right. All right, so we have some good news and bad news. The bad news is I cut the staff loose. Okay.
Oh, that's terrible.
Half an hour ago. The good news is I got an extension because this is a priceless night. But I know right now that we all have a high pressure kidney line, so I'm going to give everybody a 10-minute break. Do that. Come on back and we're going to continue.